We're going to be talking today about cues, triggers, and routines, and how you can really effectively stack cues together to build a routine that's going to create a habit. And there's some little tips and tricks I'm going to share with you that will help make that stick a whole lot better, make it a whole lot easier for it to really be effective. So before we dive into all of those particulars, I want to share just for a quick minute an overview again of the habit loop. So let me make sure that y'all can see it. Sometimes Zoom does not cooperate. So you should not see me. You should see a screen that says the power of habit loop. So can y'all see that? Awesome. Thank you, Virginia. It was not giving me the indication that it was showing, but I'm not sure it's showing over there in Facebook. Sorry about that, y'all. I will post it in there as well later. So in the habit loop, remember there are 4 basic stages there. The first one really isn't listed on there, but it's the stuff that's over here on the right-hand side in pink. It's the goals, the desired outcome, your big why, the thing that is going to be the driver. If you haven't clearly identified what it is that you hope to change, what it is that you hope to gain by creating this habit, it ain't gonna work. It's not gonna stick. No matter how absolutely tapped into that you are, it's not going to work. So you want to make sure that your why really deeply, you've really tapped into that. You're going to use that as your motivation. Then the 4 steps that we're talking about are the strategies or processes that'll help you get there. That first step is to understand what cues are. So cues are triggers. They are little tweaks, that little voices, in essence, that tell you this has happened, I need to do the next thing. So think about the things that we already do that we have triggers or cues for. In the evening, when you get ready to go to bed, I bet there's one habit that you have, and you would feel weird if you didn't do it. So I'm betting that all of y'all brush your teeth before you go to bed. Think about what the cue is to you that it's now time to brush your teeth. It's when you probably have put stuff away in the kitchen, you've walked into the bathroom, and you're preparing for bed. There's something that precedes the toothbrushing. Whatever that thing is, and it could be just as simple as walking into the bathroom at that time of day, that's the trigger for you to know it's time to brush your teeth. So we want to set up cues or triggers that are going to make it easy for your brain to understand now it's time to paint. It's that part of making it easy to get started that we want to layer deeply so that it's super easy for you to get in the mood to paint. I know a lot of people, when they get blocked or they get stuck, they talk about not being able to get in the mood to paint. It's really not about waiting around for inspiration. That's a misconception that a lot of people have. What it really is waiting around for is for those cues to build up to tell your brain that it's time to paint. And if you start walking through those cues, 99.99% of the time, you'll be able to get right into the painting mode. So let's think about what will make those cues easy. What makes them really stick? And look over here, and if you can read my chicken scratch there, it says, make them sensory. So when you want to use cues to begin to create the habit stack that makes a routine, you want to do things that are going to appeal to your senses. You want to ideally have a cue for each of the 5 senses. So all know this, but I'm going to repeat it anyway. One of those 5 senses is sight. We're really cued in on that. Another is taste. Another is smell. Another is touch. And another is hearing or sound. If you can take a cue from each one of those senses and use that you're far more likely to stack together a habit that's going to stick and then become a routine. So those cues become literally part of the routine that leads to the desired activity or outcome. Here's some of them that I use. See if you can figure out which one of those sensory cues I'm using. I talked yesterday about one of my favorites. I make coffee. So I make decaf coffee before I go into the studio. Here it is. And it goes back to when I was in grad school, and I would make coffee every morning with one of my major professors, and we would talk about what we had done in our paintings the day before, and we'd do a little informal critique, and then we'd dive right on into work. It was a part of my routine. It was a part of my regular day that I really valued. And actually, each time I do that, it takes me back to that place. And I remember somebody who was really important to my development as an artist. So coffee is one of my big cues. So type into the chat roll or into the comment box right now if you can guess which of the senses coffee appeals to. Let me know if you know which one the coffee appeals to. Absolutely. Emily says smell. Sharon says taste and smell. Fiona says taste and smell. Taste and smell. Y'all got it. You're right on it. So it appeals to two of them, taste and smell. See, back when I was in grad school, that was the era of the flavored coffees, and hazelnut coffee was what we made. And I associate hazelnut coffee with the studio. I don't make the flavored coffee as much anymore, but every time I smell hazelnut coffee, I go right back to grad school almost immediately. And it makes me want to go paint. So now I have trained myself, hazelnut coffee, painting time. That's all it takes, really. So it is taste, smell, and memory. That really helps to cement it. Judy Ann, no, who is it that's asking that question? Judy, your name and info is there so we can see who's talking. It's right there. Just look at the chat roll list and you can see the names of the people who are writing their comments. The name of the person talking is only me. I'm the only one talking. It's me, Mary. So the absolute cues right there, the coffee appeals to taste and to smell. There's one more actually in there that's almost equally important. So almost as important, bingo, Susan Hoffman, you got it, sound. The sound that the coffee pot makes as it's brewing, that kind of gurgling sound, is another cue to me that it's time to get to painting. All of those things begin to layer on top of each other. But just to keep it simple, I'm going to count that one as taste right now because I got a whole pile more of them. Does anybody remember the other thing that I talked about yesterday that I always put on when I paint? That is another cue. Bingo, Sharon, you're on it this morning. Apron. Yeah, apron. I put my apron on. The loop goes over my head and I tie it behind my back. Which sense is that appealing to? Which sense is that appealing to? What does putting on a piece of clothing appeal to? Anybody know? Awesome. Judy got it. Touch. Absolutely, Val. Touch. So a sense of touch begins to be incorporated into it when you're putting it on. And Linda, you're absolutely right. It's also sight, but it's touch and sight. So that's a really important one. Now here's how I incorporate sight into it. And I see y'all have got another one that I talked about yesterday too. So if I've made my coffee and I walk into the studio and put my apron on, I'm going to look around the room and see the painting that I was working on the day before and probably sit and sip some coffee for a little while first. Which cue, there's a cue in there, but which sense is that cue appealing to? Bingo, y'all are on it. Sight is a cue. Remember, we've got taste, sound, touch, sight, and smell. Those are the 5 senses that we're talking about now. So we've gotten a whole bunch of them already. Here's where I think the way that your studio looks can help you. I am not a huge advocate of having the tidy, groomed studio. I don't think I'll ever have a tidy, groomed studio. It's not me. Anybody else a clutter bug? There are a lot of studies that I lean really heavily on that show that being a clutter bug actually feeds creativity. So I don't feel guilty about that at all. But one of the things I think is really important is making sure that there are visual cues in your studio that make you feel creative. I collect images that inspire me. I've got photographs that I've printed out that are stuck on a bulletin board. I've got in my studio in Columbia, I have those photos up there. I have postcards that I've collected over the last 4 million years. I'm not going to say how long that is because it goes way back to undergraduate school. Postcards of other artists' work, my favorite artists' work. Postcards I collected when I lived in New York, postcards from all over. I have photographs of my horse. Now, I don't paint horses. He's still part of the inspiration. So I have visual creative inspiration all around me. Things that feed my creativity begins to appeal to that sight. Physically walking into a different space also appeals to sight. And people have understood that, architects in particular, for a long time. If you can create a visually different space, you will alter people's experience of that space. So what if your studio is not that large? Anybody have a studio on the dining room table or in a corner of the kitchen? Nothing wrong with that. How do you make that feel like studio? Because studio is not just a room, studio is a state of mind. So if you've got a corner of a room, Andrew says corner of my study, absolutely. Corner of your room, a room that you're using, then think about how you can create studio in that space. One of the ways to do it is to have a little inspiration board, to have a little bulletin board that you can tack up some of those postcards, photographs, printouts, things that feed your creativity and help you see that little corner as being a separate space, being your space. Studio doesn't mean you have to have the gorgeous 1,200 square foot freestanding studio space with a grand view of a lake. That's wonderful, but not that many people have an ideal space. You can still have the best space you can have by making it that. So think about what you can put up in your studio space, no matter how small or how large, that's going to help to feed your creative juices. Because that's how inspiration comes, by us literally consciously feeding it. So that appeals to our sense of sight. And that's a huge one for us as visual creatives, visual artists. So don't let it slip by. Make sure you tap into that. So now we've got sight. There's one more, and y'all mentioned that. Yes, sound, Val, absolutely. So sound. People have really definite opinions about how they're going to deal with sound in their studio. Some people, like me, love to paint to music. Some people hate to paint to noise. They see it as noise instead of pleasurable sound. Some people paint the best with silence. Some people paint the best with an audiobook going. Some people paint the best with Greg Allman on the stereo, whatever works for you. If you're not sure yet, I would test out all 3 to find what's going to work best for you, because that's going to make a huge difference. What you want is something that helps you lose track of time and get into flow state. So whichever one of those things works for you, go for it. One of the things I've used at times is just a recorded loop I have of the sound of the surf on the front beach, because that's my happy place. And if I play that, I get into my zone really fast. So it doesn't have to be sound like an audiobook or music. It could be your favorite kind of sound. So think about which one of those is going to work best for you. A whole range of music. It depends on the mood of the day. If you're not sure yet, I would test out all three. If you're not sure which kind of music, test them all out. It may not be what you think. It may not be what you listen to for pleasure. It may be something totally different. So if you usually listen to country, it may be that classical music is the thing that lets you tune out the world. So experiment around with that a little bit, and then create a playlist around it so that you can put it on when you go into studio and help you achieve that state of studio mind. So make sure, let's refresh again as we talk about those cues. What's going to create a routine is stacking cues that are based around the five senses: taste, smell, sight, sound, and touch. You want to hit all five. The more of those you can hit, the better off you're going to be. And that's true for whatever habit it is that you're trying to create. Now, when you first get it started, it's going to be a little rough. You're going to have to think about each one of those things. But the more you do it, the more you repeat it, the easier it's going to become. So our 5 days of working together on doing a quick painting, that's just the beginning. I would strongly recommend you keep going in some way, shape, or form and doing something towards your painting practice every single day. Doesn't mean you need to paint necessarily every day, but work in your sketchbook every day. I got the most inspiring email yesterday from, or may have been this morning, from one of the participants in the challenge. And she is just getting out of the hospital and in rehab, and after having a major health experience, and she's still doing the challenge. She can't paint where she is, but she took her pencils and sketchbook with her to the hospital, and she is doing her drawings for the challenge and feeding her creativity as she heals. And I just think that is one of the most inspirational things I've heard. And I want to remind everybody that if you do something small each day, your practice is going to grow. And it doesn't have to be the grand, huge painting. What she's doing with her sketchbook, that's going to keep her painting muscle active. Not only that, it's going to keep her brain active, and it's going to help her heal. I think it's tremendously helpful, tremendously powerful. Now, I want to go to a couple of comments that came in about studios, people talking about their studio space, because I think that's really important. Your studio doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be. And your studio could be your travel paint box. It could be your plein air easel that you set up in your backyard. It could be a corner of your kitchen counter. It could be a corner of the dining room. Just make it easy to get started. Try to find a way to store those materials close to the space that you work in so that it's really easy to get them out and dive right on in. It doesn't have to be the fancy pants studio. Those are great, but that doesn't decide whether or not you're an artist or whether or not you've got a studio. It doesn't indicate your professionalism or your passion for what you're doing at all. What indicates it is your consistent work. Showing up is more important than the space you got. Just get yourself some space somewhere and claim it. So once we've talked about this top part here, I'm going to talk about habit stacking and routines a little bit more tomorrow, but just to refresh, what comes after that is the reward. And remember, so often we don't reward ourselves for creating new habits. And we don't reward ourselves for trying things. Now, I'm not talking about giving everybody a gold star just because they tried. That's not what I'm talking about at all, because that doesn't actually do the psychological work, the subconscious work of cementing the habit. The reward is the treat. It's the Cersei you give yourself for actually doing something. And it provides some of the motivation to keep going when the going gets tough. It's like knowing your why. And when it marries with your why, when it's in alignment with your why, it makes that drive so much stronger. So don't forget to reward yourself. We're going to talk about that a good deal more on Wednesday and Thursday. It can be something like paint, a new brush, a painting knife, fresh panel from Raymar. I ordered paint from Vasari because I love their paint. And there's some paint I have had in a basket on the website for about a month. And I went on and pressed the buy button. So think about something that's going to enhance your painting practice and something that is going to make you feel like it's a treat. It doesn't have to be about paint, though. It could also be about making you just feel good. It could be a fantastic bar of chocolate. It could be a glass of wine on Friday afternoon as you look at the collection of 20-minute paintings that you've done, the 20-minute studies that you've done, and you're doing your reflection. So what it is completely up to you, but it is just necessary that you have a reward. The last part of that loop is the reflective part. It's thinking about what worked well, what didn't work, what you want to retain, and what you want to get rid of. It's the act of journaling about it. It's the act of making notes in your sketchbook. It's the act of going to your copy of the challenge guide and putting a check every day when you've done your painting. Putting a check if you've decided you're going to post it to your social media. That actual check mark, the act of making a check mark, gives us a little hit of dopamine. So the reward and the check mark, that check mark becomes a little reward, gives us a dopamine hit. And if that dopamine hit comes in alignment with what we're trying to accomplish, it cements the habit that much more. So we can actually train ourselves, and we can do a pretty darn good job of it. What I do not want to see you do, and it happens every time we do the challenge, is beat yourself up. That's not productive. I don't want to see people criticizing their paintings or criticizing themselves if they're not able to get a finished painting inside of 20 or 30 minutes. It's okay. Nobody is going to take off points or give you demerits if you're not able to do that yet. The benefit comes in the doing, not in the product. I want you to separate out process from product. And remember that failing is a good thing. You only learn by giving yourself permission to both succeed and to fail. You want to fail forward fast. So watch your self-talk, watch that chattering voice, and don't let it start to denigrate what you're doing. If it does start, stop, tell it to go sit in the corner, and then pick up what you're working on again and keep going. Don't feel like you can't post your work in the group because yours is either not done enough, not finished enough, not at the same level as, or whatever else you are judging it by. Remember, everybody starts at the beginning. And as we're working on the challenge, people are working in from different beginning points that we're all at different spots. So what as the front end of some other artist who's in the group could actually be the result of 20 or 30 years work. If you've just started 2 years ago, you're not going to be at the same spot. That's okay. Don't beat yourself up about that. Meet yourself where you are, work outside your comfort zone a little bit, a stretch, and allow yourself to let go of being perfect. And then you will really grow extraordinarily quickly. So cues, routines, rewards, and reflection are super important. They're actually way more important. That habit loop is way more important than artistic genius. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more tomorrow. But let go of that idea of artistic genius as well. We are all born with creativity. It is not something you acquire later. Human beings are creative innately. Small children know that. It's as we become adults that we become more and more inhibited in our creativity. So I want everybody to dive into doing today's painting. If you were not able to do it in 30 minutes yesterday, try setting it for 45 today. If you did it within 45 yesterday, shave off 5 minutes and try to go for 40 today. Take a picture of it at the end of that time period, whether you're doing 45 or 20, and post it into the Facebook group or post it onto your social media account. That's a form of accountability. And remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be done. If you can't stand it and you can't leave it alone, and you want to dive back into it some more, then go for it. But I want you to see what you're able to do within that time frame. So at least take a photograph of it so you have a documented record of what you were able to do in a fairly short time period. Prep time does not count towards that. It's just your actual painting time, your time with the brush or the knife in hand. Share it into the group and let us all take a look. Use the Artwork Living Challenge hashtag if you're posting on your social media, and that way we'll all be able to find it and be able to follow along on what you're doing as well. Remember, there's no behind. Done's better than perfect. Fail forward fast. Talk to y'all again soon. Bye-bye for now.